And welcome to another podcast edition of Rosen Sports Monday on this rainy Monday. And yes, it is the kickoff week for Vikings training camp. And it'll be all things Vikings between now and hopefully a Super Bowl. Okay, we're going to get into that a little bit later. But I am so thrilled to have a good friend of mine and a wonderful contributor to the state of Minnesota as my special guest today, because he has a love of both, of course, the law of Minnesota and the Minnesota Vikings. Anyone that would buy a Josh Dobbs jersey is a friend of mine. So Andy Luger is here, longtime U.S. attorney for the state of Minnesota. Andy, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here, my friend, and so much to talk about. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me. And I do think, I've been listening to the podcast, I don't think you talk about Josh Dobbs enough.
Enough? Well, I got news for you. We're going to talk about him today only because, like I said, anybody who bought a Josh Dobbs jersey, we did have that mania. We could just talk about it right now. I mean, it was 2 or 3 weeks of absolute mania for the guy, considering he just came out of nowhere and was playing at that level going, well, who is this guy? Did he come from the planet Krypton or something? I mean, but you bought a jersey.
Well, because I love that story. And we can talk more about what makes people tick. I love a story with a guy who comes out of nowhere, got here on a Wednesday, if I remember correctly. He's the third string quarterback, and now he's in the game. He doesn't know the plays. He doesn't know the teammates. And he's making magic. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
And KOC, you had like only 15 seconds to relay the play to his helmet. So, I mean, he was many times is almost like going from by the seat of his pants, trying to make it up. You kind of knew there was a shelf life to what was going to happen with Josh Dobbs. But for those moments, you can't ever give that up. He had his moments where people were going nuts. This was like, there was an old Warren Beatty movie, Heaven Can Wait.
Heaven Can Wait, yeah.
And that's what I kept thinking about, that someone took over his body and is a quarterback for an NFL team right now.
So my goal in life, my single goal in life, is to have a conversation with Josh Dobbs about those 3 weeks, Mark. And that, you ask, who do you want to meet live or dead? And I want to talk to Josh Dobbs.
By all accounts, he's a really great guy. I mean,
he has to be.
And he's gone. This was not his last stop. He's bounced around and everything, and he's made a few paychecks here and there. But circumstances being what they are, it wasn't something that was going to sustain itself. And we wish Josh the best. But you still have the jersey.
I do. And, we used to have a Rosen's restaurant in town.
Yes, we did.
I think we need a Dobbs restaurant.
That's a stretch, but I think Josh would still call this home. So let's get into your background a little bit. As I mentioned, you were a U.S. attorney here for the state of Minnesota. Started in 2014. You had a couple different runs here.
Right. So I was appointed by President Obama in 2014, and I had a 3-year run then. Left under President Trump and was invited back by President Biden to come back and serve a second time, from 2022 to 2025.
And then currently now you're back practicing law, back at another cozy little law firm.
Still practicing, hopefully getting better all the time.
I don't know why they talk about when they usually the legal term, they use the word practicing as if you haven't perfected it yet.
Well, because it's kind of like golf. You can always do better, and you can always duff one, and people do.
Your background, Amherst College. I met some of your college roommates, and you were born in Englewood, New Jersey, which you just mentioned to me was more like a Mayberry, USA. It wasn't exactly a big town, sprawling town when you think of the East Coast.
Right. So I was born at Englewood Hospital in northern New Jersey in Bergen County, right across the George Washington Bridge, if people know the geography, across the Hudson River, and then grew up and actually went to a little high school called Cresskill High School, which now people talk about because the town is sort of upgraded and the high school is upgraded. It wasn't that way then. And I went to Cresskill High School, 10,000 residents in Cresskill, 130 in my graduating class.
Wow.
And
amazing.
I was fourth, just for those of you keeping score.
You were fourth?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You weren't a disappointment to your parents, is what I'm saying.
I kind of was. My sister was the smart one. I was a football player, and my mother more than one time said, young Jewish boys don't play offensive line, which, there's something to that. But I was struck by the idea of being an offensive guard and played literally one position for maybe 14 years, which was offensive guard. I never played another position.
And that's why I know you. We'll get to your opinions about the Vikings offensive line, because you have very strong opinions about that and have been for the last couple of years. What, beyond anything, you mentioned going to Amherst. What I'm really, among other things, impressed with you, and I met him a couple weeks ago, the fact that you've maintained these wonderful friendships. Men don't normally have that same bond with the friends as women do, as your wife does and my wife does. They have very strong bonds. Guys are kind of, but you have very strong bonds. And I could tell the night I met you at J.D. Hoyt's with some of your friends, and I know obviously D-Mac and a few other people, that it's as if you guys are still hanging out in college.
So that's been a pattern in my life, from grade school to high school to college to law school and beyond. And I kind of can sort of pinpoint when all that started for me, but I've always had a group of very close friends. So if my friends, and they keep talking about it, my friends from Cresskill come here because a couple of them are Vikings fans. If they were to come here, you would see the same thing. There's a tight, really strong feeling of connection, and it is as though we've never been apart.
And that's wonderful. I mean, it's such a. I picked up on it right away, and there's nothing better. I have a group of high school friends. I see, every couple of months we get together and have dinner, and it's as if time stood still. You start talking about stuff that happened how many years ago, 40 years ago, whatever it might be.
So I went back in 2017 after President Trump got elected, and I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I had a little bit of time before I figured out what I wanted to do, what law firm I wanted to go to. And a friend of ours from grade school had died, and a group was getting back together. In April of 2017, I go back to my little town, and there's an Italian restaurant in the town next door that we always went to, Piero's, and they book the side room at Piero's, and there's maybe 20 of them and their spouses. We all get together, and they'd sort of watched me. I moved to Minnesota and things that they're New Jersey guys. So I sit down for dinner, and the one guy, my friend Tom, who I've been friends with since fifth grade, looks at me and he says, "We got a bone to pick with you." And I said, "Tell me that." He says, "You moved to Minnesota, you did all these things, you became a prosecutor, you got that big fancy job, and we read that Star paper that comes out there, and they did a profile on you, and now I'm nervous." It's like, well, I said I'm from New Jersey, because that's, if you're from Jersey, you better, you got to do that, Mark. And I said, "So what?" He goes, "Well, the opening of the article said that you were a big Bruce Springsteen fan, because that's sort of in the DNA, 70s kid." And he said, "And it said you've probably been to about 75 Bruce Springsteen concerts." And I'm like, "Yeah, give or take. That's what I think." What is that? They stopped counting at 250, these guys.
Wow.
I embarrassed them. By
saying that.
Yes, by saying I'd only been.
Only 75 Springsteen concerts.
And they were annoyed. And I said, "You guys go up and down the East Coast. You can go see Bruce Springsteen in Asbury Park," which they were doing the next night, by the way. So that shows that bond. It was so strong.
I assume you had a pretty normal childhood. You mentioned you grew up in a small town, and I don't know if you grew up wanting to play for the Yankees or the New York Giants football team. But somewhere along the line, you realized that wasn't going to happen, and had to pursue a real education and an occupation. So when did the whole legal profession kind of click?
Later. I wanted to play I was the first on baseball. I played first base. I'm lefty, and I wanted to play first base for the Yankees. My dream was to play offensive guard professionally. That all started with the Ice Bowl.
I was going to ask you. You mentioned that was something that was important to you.
Well, I'm watching TV, and I don't remember if it was a replay or live, but that moment where Bart started, and if people, listening to this don't know, please Google the Ice Bowl.
I think a lot of people have, even if they weren't born then.
I'd like to believe so, but
you never know.
And Bart Starr scores last second of the game, wins the game in the NFL championship. But it was Jerry Kramer's block of Jethro Pugh that made that happen. And you could watch it 1,000, and they called it The Block for those of you who weren't alive then. And then Jerry Kramer writes a book about it,
Oh, yeah.
which I've read 18 million times. And that had and I said to myself, that's what I want to do. I want to be an offensive guard. Not a lot of kids wake up in the morning.
You want to be the quarterback.
Right. I could care less about Bart Starr, Joe Namath, all those guys. I wanted to be Jerry Kramer. And many years later, I got to tell, through a friend of his, I got to tell him that story. But that motivated me for sports. Sports got me to college. My high school coach saw talent, and I was for New Jersey at that time, I was a good offensive guard, and I was very good in school, got me sort of interviews at a number of schools that were interested along the East Coast, and I got into college, and then immediately woke up to law, philosophy, government, things that I had never thought about before. My whole life was music and sports throughout growing up. And now I'm thrust into an area where people are really smart, which I thought I was, but it turns out I wasn't. And you got to work hard. And I found the idea of law and then ultimately law school.
How did you end up in Minnesota then? Was it because of your lovely wife, Ellen, who you met? Because did you even know where Minnesota was on the map?
So, and this will kill any political career anybody thinks I should have. But no, I did not. I'm in law school, second year. My roommate is a first-year law student, and my other roommate is teaching first-year law students. And they both meet this girl, Ellen. And they immediately say, you should go out with her. She and I had not met. You should go out with her, and we think you're going to get married. This is
quite a quantum leap there.
And this is true story. Yeah. She, by the way, didn't think so much. But so we go out, and I don't know her from Adam. We go to a half-priced movie theater for $1 in Maryland. The Big Chill was what we saw.
Oh, what a great movie.
None of her friends liked me, nor did they want me. I didn't have the best, okay. I was a loud,
okay.
I was a lot of things. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't going to use that word, but you could.
All right.
She wasn't. And they showed up at the movie theater for our first date and sat behind us.
Just to protect her.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
football play.
And Mark, people say this all the time, but it's true in this instance. Sitting at the cheap Chinese restaurant around the corner from the cheap movie theater, I didn't know money. I realized I wanted to marry her.
What was happening?
Everything about her just clicked in my brain. Now, I'm going to say this because it took a long time for her to feel anything close to the same. And you can have her on the show and she'll verify that.
I've talked to her about it.
So I was done. I'm like, this is
the one.
And she tried to break up with me, not a little down the line, because she was a first-year student. You study really hard as a first-year law student. Second year, where I was a year ahead of her. I
didn't have time to have a relationship.
And she's like, I got no time for you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're trying to break up with me. She's like, well, yeah, I got no time. So I'm really not interested in being broken up with. If you don't like me, that's one thing. But if it's time, we'll
make it work.
Yeah, and we did.
So, but she was from Minnesota. Again, we're talking to Andy Luger, longtime U.S. attorney for the state of Minnesota, in case you're just joining us. But she was from here, right? So
And I found that fascinating, but also more in an abstract way. Like, when you move to New York, that'll be an interesting story you can tell for the rest of your life, is that you grew up in this place. And when we got engaged, she made me commit, or she suggested strongly that I commit to moving to Minnesota at some point in our lives, because that was important to her. And I said yes, because I'm sitting there with a ring in my hand proposing marriage, but I also just didn't really, okay, that's nice. It's out there somewhere. And I knew the Vikings, but I didn't know anything else.
Sure.
And we get married, we move to New York, we start our lives, we have our daughter, Stephanie. I think we're just the happiest you could possibly be. I'm a federal prosecutor in Brooklyn. What could be better than that? And she looked at me and she said, it's time. And it was 1992. I was very nervous. And I have been so happy here that, yes, I'm lucky beyond belief to be married to who I'm married to, but also what she did by bringing me here.
Yeah. How many years you been married?
39.
39. How many kids?
2 kids. And they're both here.
And
2 amazing grandchildren.
I was waiting for that. You're very proud, rightfully so. This changed your life?
Yeah. Other people talk about their grandchildren, and I just tell them, that's really good. You got to meet my grandchildren.
We've been around you when that's happened. It's
so,
the best. I've seen the smile on your face. It's $1 million smile.
They're amazing. And so that's great. More, and just looking forward to life with them.
Yeah. Keeps you going.
Yeah.
It does. You were a federal prosecutor in Brooklyn, you said. I just close my eyes and imagine, somehow the mob or something, that from a movie. Was it like that? What was
exactly like
really?
That. Yeah. You cannot exaggerate what it was. So this was in the late 80s and early 90s. The office was, and I specifically wanted to go to that office. I was in law school, and I just out of nowhere got interested in the criminal law. I didn't go to law school for that reason, found it fascinating, sat down with a group of the criminal professors there, and I said, I think I want to do this. And they said, go be a prosecutor. Prosecutors have the most influence on our criminal justice system of anyone. You can do good, because I wanted to do something good for society. And they had all been public defenders. And they said, no, go be a prosecutor. So I studied being a prosecutor. I worked for a prosecutor in law school. And they all said, by the way, the office in Brooklyn, because you'll get this wide variety of experience. I had international fraud cases. I had little mob cases. They didn't let just anybody do the mob cases, and I was a rookie. They gave me the hand-me-down mob cases, but they're still cool. Sicilian heroin ring, that kind of thing.
Little things like that.
I had informants. It was, and they all talked like straight out of the movies.
Right out of Goodfellas.
Right out of Goodfellas. There's a reason why those movies are made. So the office was prosecuting John Gotti. The office was probably prosecuting all 5 mob families, Vinny the Chin Gigante, and he walked around Brooklyn in his pajamas. It was all true. And he would come to court. There he was in his pajamas with a bathrobe, trying to act crazy in court. And I had these massive fraud cases, prosecuted a Greek government-owned bank for an international, back then, $750 million money laundering scheme, which, in the 80s, $750 million was a lot of money.
Still is.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Depends who you ask. But that's what I was doing, and I was in heaven. It was a great job.
So when you moved to Minnesota with your lovely wife, Ellen, it's pretty hard in my mind to imagine having that same sort of buzz that you got from prosecuting, the mob basically in Brooklyn. What was that road like traveling to eventually land you the U.S. Attorney job here?
I was scared out of my mind. I was 30-something years old at the height of my career as a prosecutor, doing, all these great cases. And we move here, and I'm scared. Because crime in 1992, crime was not a topic of conversation. The U.S. Attorney's Office was basically not known. In New York, you go to a cocktail party. What do you do? Well, I'm an AUSA, an assistant U.S. attorney in Brooklyn. Oh, wow. And they know the cases, and you could have a conversation. Here, it's like, oh, what's that? Right. And I realized that's a good thing, to live in a community where the U.S. Attorney's Office isn't a big part of conversation, and it is now, and we can talk about that. But in 1992, it wasn't. And I didn't quite know what I'd be doing. And then a series of very large, complex fraud cases kind of appear in the office. And I got to know the FBI agents very well, and they knew I was this guy from New York, and I was hungry for big, complex cases. And I worked on a series of highly complicated national fraud cases, and that fed my appetite.
Kickstarted everything.
Yeah. And from there, and I tried them against some of the best defense lawyers in Minnesota. By the way, I kind of fell in love with the federal judicial system in Minnesota because the judges were so smart and nice. In Brooklyn, smart pretty much, nice not really. And so you'd get yelled at. in Brooklyn in court all the time. And different people yelled at you in different ways, and we all knew that. I come out here and nobody's yelling at me when I go to court. And I quickly called home back to Brooklyn to get my buddies together. I had a group of about 6, prosecutors we'd get together. And I'd say, nobody yells at you here. And they're like, well,
Minnesota nice?
Yeah. Like, well, what's that like? I said, I don't know. You go to court, you argue a motion, you either win or lose, and then you go back to your office. Really? And also, I could get to work easily. Mm-hmm. And then Mark, and everybody who moves here from any coast will tell you, the ability to walk to a ball game, the ability to go to a concert. Jimmy Buffett was in town, and Dave McLennan and I, we had been friends in college, and he's here and I'm here. We decided we want to go see Jimmy Buffett. Well, that's a whole production in New York. You're going to go to Madison Square Garden. How are we going to get tickets? How are we going to get there? I just drove to the ticket window at Target Center with my 2-year-old daughter.
Oh, my.
Buy a ticket and go home. And I'm looking around going, am I on Candid? What's going on here?
A lot changed since then. We're going to get into that. We're going to take a break because we want to get back. Fascinating conversation with Andy Luger, former U.S. Attorney for the state of Minnesota. We want to hear from our wonderful sponsors, Broadway Dental, thanks to Dr. Ben Stein, and Lexus of Wayzata, Lexus of Maplewood, my friend Charlie Swanson, the best in the business. So let's take a break. We'll come back with our conversation with Andy Luger. Hey, Rosie here for Broadway Dental and my good friend, Dr. Ben Stein. I'm a patient of Dr. Stein's at both his sleep apnea clinic and dental clinic. He has a newly renovated and conveniently located dental office in Northeast Minneapolis next to Certix. I mean, it's the most modern facility you could possibly find. Dr. Stein has a great chairside manner. He's nice. He's understanding. He obviously knows his stuff, and he'll spend quality time with each patient. We'll make sure they are properly cared for. I want to talk about beyond the obvious dental care is sleep apnea. I was diagnosed with it years ago, and I was stuck with that silly, cumbersome CPAP machine, and I couldn't wait to get rid of it. And I mentioned it to Dr. Stein, and he set me up with his sleep appliance area. And it's the easiest thing in the world. You just pop an upper, lower appliance in each night. My snoring is gone. My wife says I don't snore at all, and I get a restful night's sleep. And if you have sleep apnea, Dr. Stein is the best to see as well to help you in that area. So if you want to contact them in Broadway Dental, give them a call at 612-379-2300. That's 612-379-2300. Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. If you're in the market for a new luxury vehicle, look no further than my good friend Charlie Swanson at Lexus. Whether you're on the west or the east side of the Twin Cities, they have got you covered with 2 great locations, Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Check out the all-new Lexus TX, a spacious SUV with 3 rows of seating and plenty of room for all your gear. Head over to lexusofwayzata.com or lexusofmaplewood.com for details and to find your next ride today. And welcome back to Rosen Sports Monday. We're in the midst of a fascinating conversation with Andy Luger, former U.S. Attorney for the state of Minnesota, and talking about his role here and how it expanded during his time here, from coming here from Brooklyn, New York. You mentioned at that time in 1992, crime was not a big deal, but it certainly did change, and you saw it firsthand, where Minneapolis has become kind of a target for a lot of folks, a lot of moving targets for crime, for this, for the fraud, for gangs, and you were kind of in the middle of all of it.
Yeah.
When did it change, and how did it change your perspective?
I think it's changed a couple of times, and let me preface this by saying, no matter what we have to talk about today and what I talk about crime, this is a better place to live than any place else I've ever been. This is a great place to live. You can get around. It's still safe, relatively safe. We have theater and orchestra and music and sports, and we'll talk about the Vikings and the Twins and the Timberwolves. I'm not a hockey fan, so
that's okay.
But we have so much here, and we still do. And I don't want that to get overshadowed by the problems that we have. So I first saw the changes when I was U.S. Attorney the first time, and we got hit with this ISIS conspiracy and the terrorism conspiracy. And I ended up spending a large portion of my time as U.S. Attorney in 2014, 15, 16 on that. And I had never anticipated that, here in the middle of Minnesota, I would be in the middle of the country. I would be working on terrorism cases, and that we did. And it was frightening and concerning, and we dealt with it. And I thought everybody did a really good job. And then I go off to private practice after President Trump gets elected, new U.S. attorney comes in. And then when President Biden wins the election, I'm asked to come back. And the reason I came back was for what you just alluded to. We had violent crime now in a way that has never taken place in Minnesota before. After the unrest in 2020 and George Floyd's murder and the depletion of the police department, we were in a crisis. And I don't use that, I don't use that easily or lightly. We were in a crisis, and I was asked, we think you bring the talent and the experience to do something about that. And so I came back with a very single focus. Now, you can't just focus on one thing, but that was my focus. We're going to address this because, particularly as a transplant, I wanted us to get back to where we were. I liked it when nobody talked about gangs and violence and shootings and murders. That was the city I moved to in 1992, and I have a special sort of convert's attachment to that, and I still do. So I wanted to do what I could to get us, back or forward to a new place. And that's what we focused on. And I brought some skills and some experiences from Brooklyn, and I got a lot of input from people, all the way up to Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, on how to do it. And we got the resources and we got the focus, and everybody came together, local, state, federal, all across, to do this. And I think we made a real dent.
Before I knew you, before my wonderful wife, Karen Nelson, introduced me to you at an event over the Pavilion, over right by, what's the name of the place? Oh, by
Nicollet Island.
Nicollet Island, yeah.
I was getting, to be clear, I was getting an award. Let's say that. We could say that out loud.
Yeah,
okay.
my Lutheran, soon-to-be wife took me to a Jewish function, and I had no idea what I was walking into, but I happened the opportunity to meet you that night. But then, before that happened, you mentioned the unrest and everything else, and COVID hit, and COVID hit you hard and almost cost you your life. I mean, I didn't know you then, but you told me the story. For those people who think that COVID wasn't real, you almost passed away from it.
Yeah, I was within an hour of my life.
And this was before the vaccinations came out?
Oh, yeah. This was March of 20. This was right
when it happened.
Yeah.
So how did it?
I was. We started representing the Big Ten, and I was representing the Big Ten and flying around. We were in Indianapolis for what was going to be the launch of the Big Ten basketball tournament in March 2020. They had to shut it down. People were coughing, and I don't know exactly how I got it. On an airplane, everybody's coughing.
Around a lot of people.
Around a lot of people, and people were getting sick. And I came home, and I one of the things I do for a workout is I have a rowing machine, and I'm on my rowing machine, and I'm not feeling right. I can't imagine it's this thing that other people are talking about that's just starting to really hit the news in a big way. And I put it off and I put it off. And, you and I probably both would say the same thing. And, if you don't feel well, talk to a doctor. Don't put it off. And then ultimately my wife just says, we're calling the doctor. He hears what's going on. We go to a clinic in Plymouth in a line of clinic for a quick checkup, and they looked at me and they knew right away, and they put me in an ambulance and got me
ambulance.
And the last thing I remember before they put me under was I've never been in an ambulance before. Here I've attained the ripe old age of whatever it was at the time, and gee, this is an interesting experience. And I'm texting people to say, look, they're texting me, they're testing me, and I'm going to be fine. And that's the last I remember because they put me in a coma.
Induced a coma.
Yeah.
And you were in there for how long?
3 weeks.
3 weeks? So when you woke up, or they woke you up from it, what do you remember? What was it like?
They're all smiling. I got all these doctors and nurses, and they're all behind spacesuits. This is now April of 2020. They're in space, what I call spacesuits, but they're masks and white out uniforms. You can't really see there, but I can see they're all smiling. And they said, the first thing I hear the doctor saying, "It's all gone." And I said, "What's all gone?" And they said, all your organs were affected by the virus, and now it's literally gone. So whatever they had done, and they asked me, "Do you work out? What do you do?" And
Sure.
I give a lot of credit to my trainer. I know you had your trainer on once. If I was doing this show, I would have my trainer on, just like you did. And I was cured, for lack of a better term. And
Lucky.
look, you wake up from something like that, you have to, think about the meaning of life. I'm not a particularly spiritual person, which everybody would agree with, but that was one of those moments where I'm gonna do good.
Being in the position that you were in, did you feel you needed or wanted to be more proactive in talking about the dangers of COVID and how seriously to take it? Or did you just kind of go, you know what, it's up to you?
Here's what I did. It's a really good question. Here's what I decided to do. I couldn't believe how good, because then they took care of me, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't do it. I had no strength. And they got me better. And I was amazed, as somebody who hasn't spent time in a hospital before, the nurses and the care that they give you. And I was still loopy from the drugs. And I was talking to one of the nurses, and I was like, "This job is amazing. You do everything for me. I can't do anything for myself." She's like, "Well, that's my job." And I said, "Well, I want to give you something." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "All the nurses, I want to, can you get," my wallet was there. They had pulled it out of the side. I said, I got some money. I want to give you guys a tip or something. Right. And she's like, well, we don't really do that, but nice of you. And at some point somebody said they have a foundation. And so we've been donating to the Alina, there's different funds, and the doctors and the nurses. And
the one visual that stays with me more than any other is just the look of sheer exhaustion on the faces of so many nurses and the people who are just working countless hours in the worst possible situation, where very little knowledge was known about what they were dealing with, and yet they just went full steam ahead, like they were in a war zone. I'm
in the ICU. I wanted to get up and walk around when they got me, and the first nurse says to me, "You can't walk around." I said, "Sure I can." And there's a little tray in front of you if you've ever been in the hospital, and there's a Dixie cup of half full water, and it's literally tiny. And she says, "Pick up that Dixie cup." I'm masked up, and she goes, "We'll see if we can, have you take a drink." I couldn't lift the Dixie cup. So she said, "Taking a walk around the ward isn't happening right now." And it took a long time to get, everything working again. And, I recovered, and within...
You've had no after effects from it?
Zero.
Oh, thank God.
And it's just one of those things where you don't know why and you don't know how, but it happened. And I will, for the rest of my life, praise primarily nurses, but doctors as well, for the unbelievable 24-hour care that they put in a guy they've never met. They don't know nothing from nothing, except we're taking care of him.
Well, and thankfully you were taking care of yourself, because sadly, unfortunately, as we all know, a lot of people didn't make it through. And that's just a fact of life that we have to deal with during that time.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. This is Dawn Mitchell with a reminder. Please tune in to our podcast every week, Dawn of Sports. You can find it on Talk North Podcast Network.
I want to take a left turn here, because I know lots have happened to you professionally over the years. And, the name Jacob Wetterling is cemented in the minds of Minnesotans who grew up during that time, and looking at through all the anguish of Patty Wetterling in particular, and Jerry, her husband, I think during that time. But you were involved in the prosecution, right? Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. No, it was an important part of my life for a year.
Yeah. What was that like?
It was one of the things you're taught when you become a prosecutor.
Just after the arrest of the...
Well, no, all the way at the beginning 2015, I get a phone call from one of the county attorneys, and there's one U.S. attorney, and there are county attorneys in every county. We work together and coordinate and try to help each other out. Get a call from a county attorney in Stearns County asking me questions about child pornography sentences, and it didn't quite make sense. I mean, it was fine. It's just not a call I normally get. So when she hung up, we hung up. One of my top prosecutors comes in, and I said, boy, this weird conversation about child pornography, Stearns County, what's that about? She goes off and researches, comes back an hour later. She goes, they think they got the guy who killed Jacob Wetterling, but they can't prove it. They don't have murder charges. They don't have enough evidence.
They don't have a body.
They don't have, but they found child pornography in his home, and they're trying to figure out, do they pitch that to us as a way to get to the underlying crime? I'm like, well, okay. And then engage with the FBI, who are leading the federal side of this, the sheriff, local police, and the BCA on the state side, and the county attorney again, now that I understand what we're talking about. And we decide that we can bring federal child pornography charges in October of 2015. But we've got to tell the world, including Patty and Jerry Wetterling, who I knew a little bit, that we believe this is the guy. And that was a very tense moment, because the poor Wetterling family had been led to believe X, Y, and Z were all the people.
A lot of dead ends.
And we thought this wasn't the dead end. We thought this was the end. And so I had a long meeting with all the law enforcement folks in Stearns County with the FBI to say, before we go public with this, are we all holding hands and saying this is the guy? Because we're going to bring federal child pornography charges, but the reality is this is the guy. And talked to Patty and Jerry and started that conversation. And then we went public in October, right around Halloween of October 2015, to say, not we're charging the murder, but we're charging a guy who we think committed the murder, which is a leap of faith. And you don't normally do that, but we thought I felt like we owed it to the state. And it took almost a year for him to finally admit that he was the guy. So it took a long time while he's facing these charges and getting ready to go to trial on the federal charge. They never had enough evidence to charge him with the murder. We didn't have a body. We didn't know. So when we cut the deal, it was always going to be the deal that we would get him a certain amount of time, but he had to take us to the body and take us where he buried it, and then tell us in detail what he did and why. And so they teach you in law school and they teach you in prosecutor school, don't get emotionally attached. You got to be somewhat independent and objective, because you got to decide. And that was hard here. And it was one of those cases where I just sort of said, I've lost some of that. I'm emotionally involved. It's hard not to be. We still did the things we needed to do, but it was draining. And then there was a week, 10 days, when he signaled he was ready to tell us and he was ready to, plead, where we were putting the deal together, but we needed to believe him. The last thing I wanted was to perpetrate what would have been a hoax on the people of Minnesota and on the Wetterlings. So we went through detailed process of interviewing him, going through the detail, cross-examining him, challenging, and then we got him out of jail, needed the FBI's permission. We got him into the possession of the FBI and then drove him to where he buried the body.
And it was pretty close by where the Wetterlings lived, correct? Do you think about the actual kidnapping that night? And no one knew, of course, but as it turned out, it wasn't very far.
It was right there.
Who broke the news to Patty and Jerry? Was that a law enforcement?
It was a combination of us. Yeah. And I had Patty, I don't promote books, but Patty wrote a book about this.
I know she did.
And it's accurate. I said to her, because I've talked to her at length about it, it tells everything from kind of her side, and she portrays accurately our conversations and what we were doing. But she didn't know some of the details on the law enforcement side of how hard it was to get to this point. But, we all broke it to her. The hardest, I think, was to have the entire family meet with the sheriff to hear what this guy was going to say in court before. I wanted them to hear it privately and process it before we walked into court. And that was hard.
The entire entire state breathed a sigh of relief. I think people never, ever imagined them finding the killer and, more importantly, having closure to find Jacob.
And Patty and Jerry are wonderful people. The whole family is wonderful, and I can't say enough about them. But they invited us, myself, other law enforcement leaders, to their private funeral, and so that that's a life-changing experience. Yeah. And if I said to people, if I never do anything good again in my life, playing that role in that case is enough.
Powerful. Again, we're talking to Andy Luger. Before you left the U.S. Attorney Office, I know in many discussions we had talked about the gang problem in Minneapolis in particular, and the feds got involved, unlike we've seen before, where you were picking up guys and they were thinking they maybe were going away for a week or so, and all of a sudden they're getting 30 years or more. Has a lot of that been eradicated?
Some of it, a good chunk of it. What I said when we started down this road, and I didn't know that my time was going to be limited, but we worked fast. I said it was going to take about 5 years. We got 2 years into it before I had to leave. They're continuing it, and it's making. I've just heard from people in the community and from law enforcement. It's making a tremendous difference, but you can't let up because there's always somebody ready to come in and step in where the last folks left off. So I think it's going to take a couple more years to really get us to where we need to be. Police chiefs invested in it, the community's invested in it, and I'm hoping that they can continue.
What I was going to ask you about is the transitioning into the law firm as well right now. Is that been back where you started?
Yeah.
You find it enjoyable right now?
Yeah, I do. I really like mentoring and providing help to young lawyers. I got a lot of help, more tough love than other. It was a Brooklyn kind of help, but it was help. I got a lot of help from just great people, and I believe in that. And so I'm meeting on a regular basis, talking about their careers and where they're going, what works for them.
In the midst of everything, I remember asking at one point before this god-awful assassination of Melissa Hortman and her husband took place, if you ever feared for your safety. Was that a game changer in your mind when that happened and the number of other people that potentially, a couple of people were shot, but was it an isolated thing or was it something that's more endemic to what's going on in our world today?
I don't think we know. I think it's probably more endemic to what we're going through. We're learning more about this guy all the time, and clearly law enforcement is, what motivates somebody. We've always had that in America. There's always been somebody, you can use whatever term you want, deranged or otherwise. We've had that. I had a death threat where I had protection and we had to go find the guy and get him arrested and prosecuted. But you sort of know there's that part. That was during the ISIS period, not during the gang period. The gangs left me alone. But it's hard to tell, and I don't want to overstate or understate where we are. People are rightfully concerned for their safety. They should be. Where we're going with that, I'm not ready to say yet.
Well, let's segue now into one of your favorite topics that you text me about all the time. That's the Minnesota Vikings. And I know it's a tough segue, but it's one that you're passionate about. And in particular, since you were a former offensive lineman, I can't tell you how many times you texted me in the last couple of years, they've got to fix their offensive line. And you picked up on it right away. And looky, we don't know what the results are going to be, but the Vikings reinvested big time in their offensive line. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why maybe you're excited about this season.
So thank God. So before I knew you, Mark, I was friends with Kevin Warren. People will remember Kevin was the COO and president of the Vikings. And I would text him. Sometimes play by play during a game about the Vikings because they always had all this talent. And you can't have a porous offensive line. And I don't know these guys personally who were on the line, and God bless them. I had my own problems with big people who would get around me and crush the quarterback. And, I have literally those memories in my head. But you can't build a successful team without either a Fran Tarkington who doesn't care what the line is like because he's going to run around for 10 minutes, or a great offensive line. And I've been pounding that table for years. And so when they finally seemed to me, they were like doing it. Yes, I'm excited. You need a bunch of, and the numbers go up. When I was, It could have been 300. Now it's 350. You need a bunch of these guys, keep them healthy, and protect your quarterback. And a decent quarterback with these receivers and this backfield can make magic. So why it took a while before they called me and said, you're right? I don't know.
Well, look at the last, the Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs. You think of the most successful teams of late who've had really good runs. They have really good offensive lines. They talk about Pat Mahomes, talk about Jalen Hurts, talk about Saquon Barkley. Ask any of those guys about the offensive line. That's what won them Super Bowl rings.
So finally, we may be there.
Yeah.
And by the way, the other thing about Minnesota that kills me is, people talk all the time. When is Minnesota going to win a Super Bowl? Right? Jim Klobuchar wrote that book.
Sure did.
But you went to 4 Super Bowls.
I remember all of them.
But people need to recognize that in the rest of the country, going to 4 Super Bowls is a big deal. Most people live in a city that maybe has been to 1. And I know this is like a chip on Minnesota's shoulder and all that. I look at it differently. You were the second best team in all of football 4 different times. I haven't lived in a lot of cities where you could say that. So I just give a little bit of a pump up.
The only thing I'll say is that during those Super Bowls, the Super Bowl itself was not a huge event like it is today. When they played the Kansas City Chiefs, it was played, the Vikings practiced in a high school gymnasium, I think, and, they got steamrolled. The Vikings never led in any of those Super Bowls. Obviously, the pain I think most people have associated with is, probably to me, it's the 98 season. Right. It's the Brett Favre season, throw across your body, the 41 donut, whatever it might be.
Yep.
I think those losses hurt more than any of the Super Bowl losses that people in this generation remember.
So why not remember the Minnesota Miracle?
I'm with you.
Again, I've lived in a number of places that never experienced a pass and a catch and a touchdown like that.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm a half full kind of guy.
That's all right. Hey, and before we go, you mentioned at the beginning, we started out talking about your love of music, in particular, Bruce Springsteen. And I know he's got a movie coming out.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't wait to see it. Right. And you've seen him in concert, unfortunately, only how many times? 70 sometimes or something, give or take.
Yep. It's going to be interesting because it focuses on a very short period of time in his career and not the times that people know so much about, but with the making of the record Nebraska, which those of us who have Bruce Springsteen in our DNA was sort of like, okay, Bruce, you took a little time and you went and did that. And then you came back and then you had all the hits. And the great tours, but you did your little Nebraska thing. And now we're going to delve into it. There's a book about it that they turned into a movie, just like with the Dylan biopic. It started with a book, then they turned it into a biopic. I'm nervous as a Springsteen person. I'm nervous that it won't be great. I think it's going to be very good. But when I go back and talk to my Jersey friends and my college friends, and we're all waiting for this to come out in October, and we're obsessed with it as we are, we're nervous about it.
In the meantime, we are going to go attend Paul McCartney, who at the age of, I think will be 84 maybe, or close to 84 when we see him. And you talk about athletic performances, Springsteen, these guys do 3-hour concerts, whatever it might be. There's an admiration you have to have beyond, even if you love his music or don't. When I went to go see McCartney, I don't know how many, 12 years ago, he didn't take a sip of water. He was up there, never did costume change, just sang hit after hit after hit. But I was looking at it as an athletic performance. And it's inspiring to me to watch artists like that perform.
Each of us should have something we care about so much
right,
that we can continue to do it at that level, or maybe not that level, but we can do it to the best of our ability into our 80s. And, Springsteen, just saw him recently, still doing it. McCartney, Ringo Starr.
Yeah,
looks
Ringo's
like
in Vegas right now. Will be.
And they don't need the money. They're not doing this for the extra whatever that they're going to get. It's because they feed off of it. They're good at it. It gives them life. And that's a life lesson for all of us, because there's got to be something that keeps us all going. grandchildren and other things, but what is it that's going to motivate you when you're in your 70s and 80s to be that positive and upbeat? And that's what I take away from it. The talent is there, but it's more that energy and excitement and positivity that they bring to what they do. I think we could all learn from that.
Great note to end on. Andy Luger, thank you so much for spending some time with us on this podcast today. It was been very enjoyable. And thank you, more importantly, for your wonderful friendship.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for your friendship, Mark, and the texts.
You got it. Thanks for listening, everyone.